Something subtle begins to shift when familiar faces, places, and conversations start to lose their meaning. It isn't boredom, it's more like a quiet untying. The threads that once anchored the day-to-day start to loosen, not out of rebellion but resonance. During certain cosmic events like the current wave of Eta Aquariids, a kind of atmospheric thinning occurs. It's as if reality turns translucent for a moment, and in that translucence, the deeper layers of a person begin to speak louder than the surface ones. That sense of wanting space, of pulling back from the noise, isn't always a signal of disconnection. Sometimes it's a recalibration. Ever notice how right before something vital clicks into place, everything else becomes intolerable? That's not chaos. That's alignment demanding silence. If the surrounding world starts to feel like static, perhaps it's because something precise and necessary is trying to tune in. And maybe, just maybe, the current isn't pushing away from people, but towards something that doesn't have a voice yet. So here's a question worth pausing for. What if isolation isn't an absence, but a summons? Not to escape life, but to re-enter it with different instructions. Sometimes the atmosphere shifts in a way that isn't visible, but unmistakably felt, like standing near a power grid humming just beneath the ground. Right now, something ancient is falling through space, not as spectacle, but as signal. What's descending isn't just fragments of stone, it's the residue of timelines cracking open. And when that kind of frequency floods the field, contact becomes distortion. It's not about fearing others, it's about preserving clarity while the signal is volatile. Ever tried tuning an old radio in a storm? Every voice becomes static, every message gets warped. That's what happens during these energetic influxes. Interactions don't carry truth, they carry interference. That's why stepping back is not avoidance, it's filtration. Isolation becomes a kind of sacred insulation, and in that stillness, something stabilizes. What if this isn't loneliness but a shelter? What if solitude is not the symptom but the medicine? The question then becomes, are most people equipped to hold space for what's arriving? Or are they echo chambers for what's being cleared out? If something inside you felt still while watching this, it means you're aligning. Subscribe and stay close, because the transmission continues. There are moments when presence doesn't drift. It gets lifted, not drifted away, not wandered off, but consciously extracted. That's a different kind of silence, one that doesn't arise from avoidance, but from precision. Lately, the nocturnal awakenings, the emotional thinning, the strange sense of being somewhere else while still fully awake, those aren't symptoms of disconnection. They're signals of redirection. During celestial surges like this one, when stellar remnants cut across the upper atmosphere, subtle thresholds open, and within those thresholds, resonance matters more than proximity. It's not about shutting the world out, it's about tuning out frequencies that scramble clarity. Ever considered that withdrawal might not be voluntary? That it's not the one leaving who decides, but something far deeper pulling them beyond reach? This isn't self-isolation. It's a soft extraction from distorted fields. The energy within becomes too refined to reverberate off the chaotic rhythms of others. Ask this honestly. What if the current stillness isn't emptiness, but the space between dimensions aligning? If you understood even part of this, it means the signal is reaching you. Subscribe. The rest will make sense soon enough. There's a peculiar texture to certain interactions lately, like walking into a room where everyone is speaking the same language. But somehow the words no longer land. Faces blur into noise, and conversations feel like trying to tune into a channel just slightly off frequency. It might seem like something is out of sync, but maybe that strange dissonance is actually a calibration. When a deeper resonance begins to awaken within, external alignment doesn't follow immediately. It resists. The body shows up, the voice responds, but the core somehow remains just beyond the conversation. This isn't social fatigue, it's energetic clarity. The collective hum right now resembles a hallway filled with flickering lights. Loud, inconsistent, and blinding. But when one begins to carry a different current, that noise becomes intolerable. Not because it's wrong, but because it's incompatible. Here's a thought worth sitting with. What if awkwardness is not a flaw in connection, but evidence that a different signal is beginning to come through? One that requires solitude to be fully received. There are pauses in life that aren't about absence. They're about sanctity. The recent stillness isn't rejection from the world. It's a deliberate quieting of the outer stage so something delicate can arrive. This kind of quiet doesn't echo, it absorbs. When the atmosphere charges with unseen frequency, not every exchange is meant to be shared. Certain insights, certain shifts, don't arrive through dialogue but through internal reception. Going offline in that sense isn't detachment, it's encryption. Something subtle begins to rewrite the inner framework, and that process doesn't broadcast through noise. It's no coincidence this happens under a celestial downpour. Strange, isn't it? The same sky unfolds above every set of eyes, yet only some walk away changed. Maybe the sky isn't the real message, it's just the reflection of one. Ever wondered why some people report heat in their chest during these events, while others only notice stars? Maybe because transformation isn't a spectacle, it's a private signal, and stillness is the only place it knows where to land. There's a difference between witnessing an event and being shifted by it. A meteor shower for most registers as background beauty, a flicker across a screen, a headline in passing. But for those whose inner circuitry is tuned, these celestial events don't just appear, they resonate. Lately, certain bodies have felt heavier, as if gravity itself became more personal. Some speak of buzzing stillness, where motion doesn't exist, yet energy floods the system. Others mention a strange fluidity in time, as if the hours melt at the edges. This isn't coincidence. These are activation symptoms. The remnants of an ancient traveler in the sky stir something dormant, but only within vessels prepared to receive. It's not about belief, it's about frequency. When a signal moves through space, not every antenna responds. But when it does, the shift isn't mental, it's cellular. That's what most miss. They look up, say beautiful, then move on. But have you considered this? What if what falls from the sky doesn't ask for attention? It asks for readiness? And what if only those vibrating on a certain note can actually feel the burn of light and motion? Still thinking about what you just heard? That's not an accident. Subscribe. Let what's waking up in you keep unfolding. Not every transmission is meant for the masses. Some wavelengths move through the collective undetected, invisible to the eye but loud to those tuned in. What's happening now isn't chaos, it's calibration. The current stellar activity, though grand in the sky, operates more like a beacon than a spectacle. It doesn't simply illuminate, it interrogates. It moves through the field and pulses in search of resonance, scanning for frequencies refined enough to absorb the charge. That's why some go unaffected, moving through the day as if nothing unusual hums beneath the surface. They're not immune, just untuned. The signal passes through, but nothing catches. For others, however, there's a distinct sensation, an internal stir, a sense that reality has developed a second layer. It's not something seen, but felt. And it begs the question, what makes one body light up while another stays dim? Could it be that the frequency of consciousness determines reception, not attention? That some don't experience the shift not because they're excluded, but because their signal simply isn't on? Think about that next time the silence starts to feel loud. Maybe it's not silence at all. Maybe it's scanning. There are sensations that defy language, moments when the body feels displaced not in space, but in time. A subtle lag emerges, like reality moves a frame ahead while awareness scrambles to catch its shadow. It starts in the bones, a kind of existential vertigo. Some report sudden rushes of warmth near the crown. Others catch themselves mid-thought in a timeline they don't remember living. There's déjà vu without a clear origin, or memory flashes that arrive as echoes from a life never lived. And when that happens, something heavy pulls inward. Not down, but deep. It's as though consciousness is being called below the surface to retrieve a code buried under layers of waking life. Strange, isn't it? How disorientation can feel like direction? Here's where things turn. These anomalies aren't interruptions, they're invitations. What if the very sensations dismissed as glitches are actually updates in progress? Data too fast for linear time to digest? Have you noticed how the more disoriented the moment, the more present the awareness becomes? That's not dysfunction, that's acceleration. Deep internal descent never takes place in the middle of motion. It unfolds in stillness, subtle, quiet, intentional. The kind of quiet that doesn't just hush the outer world, but stills the inner static. That's why distance begins to form, not as punishment, but as preparation. The system, when left uninterrupted, starts to rewire. Physical rhythms shift. Emotional residue clears. Energetic patterns realign. In that silence, an unspoken code begins to load. Something that can't be accessed while constantly entangled in the noise of shared expectations. It's not that connection becomes wrong, it's that signal fidelity matters now. What happens during this meteor surge isn't entertainment, it's measurement. It checks for presence, not performance. Many will scroll through its light, nod once, and return to distraction. But those pulled inward are being weighed. And here's something worth asking. Could stillness itself be the passcode? Could the inability to sit with silence actually be what blocks the entire transmission? If so, what does that say about a culture addicted to reaction, yet desperate for revelation? It's possible for entire timelines to unfold in the background of someone's life without them ever noticing. Some glide through these energetic shifts as if nothing ever touched the surface. No friction, no resonance, no trace. They feel fine, even comfortable. But comfort isn't always clarity. To remain unaffected doesn't mean alignment. Sometimes it simply means untouched. What if that's the point? Some systems are too closed to register the update. Meanwhile, others walk around heavy buzzing, stretched between dimensions, wondering why their senses feel scrambled. That contrast isn't coincidence, it's permission. When the atmosphere bends and pulses through the field, only a few bodies pulse back. Those who feel everything, who carry a kind of raw awareness through their skin, are not broken. They are responsive. What does it mean to be activated, really? Perhaps it's not something that happens to a person, but something already chosen long before this version of time began. Ever considered that discomfort might actually be the signature of inner readiness? And if so, what if the signal was never external? It just needed an awakened system to echo back. There are phases where presence begins to blur, not outwardly, but internally. A strange sense of absence creeps in, not because anything is missing, but because something has begun to override. Life continues on the surface. Conversations, tasks, familiar routines, but the essence quietly slips into a hidden chamber, out of sync with the noise. It feels like vanishing, like going ghost without effort or intention. But this isn't erasure, it's encryption. The system pulls itself out of range for a reason. In environments flooded with static, deep processes must occur in private. And that withdrawal, it's not escape, it's protection. The architecture of the next version begins here, under the radar. Ever noticed how updates never announce themselves mid-function? The core goes dark, silent, unseen. Only after the system reboots does the upgrade reveal itself. So maybe the real question is this: if the soul steps back without warning, is that disconnection or is that design? And if design, who or what is initiating it from the inside? Think about it. What if disappearing was never the problem, but the protocol? Lately, re-entering conversations feels like trying to sync two songs playing in different keys. Technically possible, but jarring. The tone of small talk grows hollow. Familiar voices carry unfamiliar static. Even the rhythm of interaction shifts, as if stepping into a room where everyone rehearsed a script that no longer applies. This friction isn't social awkwardness, it's energetic displacement. The internal landscape has shifted into a new chamber, but the external world hasn't followed. Tuning back into its signal creates interference, not clarity. And here's the strange part. It used to feel normal. Now it scratches. Why is that? Could it be that once an internal system recalibrates, anything out of alignment begins to burn at contact? It's worth considering. When connection becomes more draining than nourishing, maybe it's not dysfunction, it's transformation. So the discomfort, it's not resistance, it's feedback. And the next time a conversation feels like static or a room feels like cardboard, pause and ask, has the world changed, or has the signal simply moved into a range no longer compatible with the crowd? Every system, no matter how expansive, requires calibration. This period, marked by the meteor surge, isn't a spectacle, it's a suspension. A pause not in time, but in interference. Think of it less like a break and more like a silencing of the external, so the internal can tune in without distortion. The alignment of this cosmic rhythm isn't random, it's sequenced. And right now the field becomes permeable, open to transmissions carried not by light, but by memory coded in motion. What filters through isn't just data, it's recognition. The body absorbs it like a forgotten language suddenly remembered in dream state. Not because the mind understands it, but because something older within responds. And here's the curveball. How can something feel ancient and brand new at the same time? That paradox, that sense of standing inside a moment that doesn't belong to the clock, is what makes this phase more than celestial. It's cellular. And if everything else suddenly feels frozen in place, maybe it's because this isn't a delay. It's a design pause measured to the second. Ever wonder who's doing the timing? Integration doesn't unfold in noise. The most significant recalibrations occur beneath the surface, where language fades and presence sharpens. This phase isn't about checking out, it's about shielding, not from others, but from interference. The shift doesn't arrive while managing surface-level interactions or translating one's state for outside understanding. It arrives in the in-between, the space without commentary. That's where the system becomes permeable enough to receive. For now, visibility dims, not to erase, but to preserve. The veil is temporary but intentional, woven to protect the field while it rewrites in silence. What others may see as withdrawal is actually a chamber of refinement. And when the dust, literal and energetic, settles, the version that re-emerges won't just return, it will relaunch. So here's something to reflect on. If a process is sacred, shouldn't its environment be sacred too? What if this pause isn't a break at all, but the precise condition required for evolution to actually anchor? In that case, maybe the real transformation was never meant to be witnessed while it's happening, only after. There's a peculiar hour that pulls the body from sleep without cause, just past the midpoint of night, when the world is its quietest and the veil is thinnest. Around 3 a.m., a different rhythm begins to pulse beneath the stillness, and for those attuned, the internal system responds. Not with fear or restlessness, but with sudden, inexplicable alertness. This isn't insomnia, it's reception. The timing is not a coincidence. The hours before dawn mark the apex of the current celestial influx, energies traced back to cosmic debris far older than language, entering the atmosphere with surgical timing. Some feel a pressure behind the eyes, others a warm surge at the top of the skull, or the sensation of standing near an unseen signal tower. But regardless of the form it takes, the message is the same. Awakening happens in layers. And the strange thing is, this kind of awakening doesn't require meaning in the moment. So let's ask something uncomfortable. What if being pulled from sleep isn't an inconvenience, but a handshake from the unknown? And more importantly, what if ignoring it is the real interruption? There's a narrow window in the deep hours of morning when the planet subtly repositions itself, tilting not just in space, but in awareness. Between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., the electromagnetic shield relaxes, the atmosphere thins just enough, and the body, whether awake or half dreaming, becomes a more receptive surface. It doesn't require action. Whether lying beneath the layers or staring into the dark ceiling, something arrives. Not loud, not invasive, just a soft pulse that knows where to land. This isn't mysticism, it's timing, a moment when Earth's position allows for influx. Think of it like an aperture opening, but only briefly. The signal, whatever form it takes, thoughts not born of one's own mind, warmth without a source, the ache of recognition, doesn't care if attention is focused. It simply finds its way in. So the question isn't whether the transmission is real. The question is whether silence has been deep enough to let it echo. Isn't it strange how the most profound receptions often require the least conscious effort? almost like the universe doesn't wait for permission, it waits for stillness. There's a subtle choreography that plays out during those early hours, one not choreographed by the conscious mind, but by something far deeper in the system. Sensitive individuals, those whose inner membranes are thinner, more permeable, begin to stir. Not from dreams, not from noise, but from a ripple that brushes against the fabric of reality itself. Sometimes it arrives as a startle, other times as a quiet knowing, and occasionally as a soft confusion, like waking up into a frequency rather than a room. These are not ordinary awakenings. They are response codes. The edge between dimensions softens, and those attuned to even the slightest shift begin to register what others sleep through entirely. What causes that stirring? Could it be that the field itself sends out a kind of invisible pulse, looking for those who can echo it back? And if so, what kind of wiring allows for that resonance? Maybe that's the real threshold, not the hour of waking, but the openness to respond without needing to understand. So when the body stirs before sunrise, ask this: was it restlessness or was it reception? Because the difference might be everything. There are moments when the body reacts before thought arrives, when something quiet, coded, and ageless drops through the atmosphere like a note passed in a silent room. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't wait for belief. Even if no light streaks across the sky, the impact still lands. That's the paradox. What falls isn't always visible. It's vibrational. And when it hits, it doesn't strike the eye. It activates the system. The nervous system specifically becomes the antenna. And what many mistake for disturbance, a restless night, a jolt awake, a feeling of presence in an empty room, is actually contact. Not an interruption, but an invitation. Because this isn't about meteor showers or spectacle. It's about reception. And not everyone receives the call. But for those who do, there's no mistaking the pull. So let's turn the lens for a moment. What if the real question isn't why did that happen, but what is waking up inside that needed this exact moment to respond? Because when the signal drops, the system doesn't just notice, it remembers. The signals don't land the same way for everyone. Some awaken with racing thoughts, as if the mind has been running all night through unfamiliar corridors. Others jolt upright, heart pounding with no known trigger. And then there are those who rise slowly, blinking into darkness with the eerie sense of being out of sync with the current timeline. Like reality shifted half a degree while the body slept. The responses vary, but the source is consistent. What shifts isn't the symptom, it's the sensitivity. The veil thins during this window, and something old and electric moves through the collective field. But it doesn't knock on every door. It finds the systems already cracked open, the ones calibrated enough to register the hum beneath the silence. That's why one person dreams in static, and another feels like they've been pulled from an alternate version of their life. It's not about drama, it's about resonance. So ask this: if the atmosphere carries a frequency meant for only a few, what determines who hears it? Maybe it's not belief or knowledge, but the readiness to listen without knowing what's being said.